Hey everyone, welcome back to Pretending with Dice. As always, I'm your host, AJ. Welcome to not only the first episode of 2021, but also the first in a brand new series of interview episodes that we're going to be doing. I'm very honoured to be joined today by the host of not one, but two amazing RPG podcasts, What Am I Rolling and the DM's Book Club, Fiona. Thanks so much for joining me.
Oh, thank you for having me, or thanks for me for asking you to put me on this podcast. It's all good stuff. Thank you. How are you?
I'm pretty good. Yeah. Now the sort of holiday, sort of December craziness is sort of out of the way. We're sort of getting back on track. It's always a bit of a busy time here for, well, not just for sort of podcast stuff, but just life in general. So no.
It's so weird. You think end of the year is like it's darker, so people don't have that much stuff to do. Apparently, everyone's just super busy, and then you can't be contacted for like 2 weeks. But you don't really do anything, or you don't really know. It's really. I had the same thing. I obviously didn't go anywhere for the holidays, but I was just like, God, how is time just is an illusion, and it just stretches and stuff. It's so weird. Yeah,
I feel like the last 3-4 weeks have just sort of dropped off of. They've just started, and now suddenly we're like in the second half of January, and it's just gone.
It's so weird, isn't it? I did think that to myself today. I'm like, God, January's already gone. What am I going to do?
I don't know what's happened with it, but I mean, it's led it to being what seems to be like an unplanned tradition every year on the podcast of just like us having no episodes almost to put out in January, so we seem to take the month off.
Amazing.
Yeah. Never on purpose, because I want to keep the momentum rolling and keep things going, but then it just comes around to January and it's like, well, okay, well, I guess we're taking a break. But we're back now. I
guess we're on leave now.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, I like having a slight break in the editing, but yeah, it's good to keep things rolling.
Yeah, of course.
I suppose first things first, we should probably, for our listeners who maybe haven't sort of had a chance to listen to your stuff, sort of maybe give like a bit of a brief rundown about sort of what your podcast's kind of deal is. Because I mean, even before we do that, I mean, I don't know if I have the mental brain space to host 2 podcasts at once. So I mean, I'm incredibly impressed with with that straight away. But so yeah, I guess maybe just give our listeners a bit of a quick rundown, I guess.
Yeah, no worries. And yeah, don't worry. I also don't think I have headspace for 2 podcasts either. And yet here we are.
Here we are.
So I'm just, it's, when you think of, I should really get numbers down for these things, but I never do. So I am the host of What Am I Rolling, which is a twice monthly RPG one-shot podcast. We've been going for nearly 3 years now. I think it's like, when it's like February at some point. And that came about because, so in my boring, normal 9-to-5 job, I work as a content developer for a university. So basically getting like lecture notes and video capture, etc., online for the students. And I've been a big proponent of getting audio online because, frankly, no one needs to watch an hour video of a lecture when you could just listen to the audio if you're on the bus and stuff like that. And and I just think there's something amazing about audio that can is accessible to everyone, but also it's easier to edit, it's easier to upload to the internet. It's just a whole load of things. So I was a big proponent of that, but I didn't have the skills. And then on top of that, I have a ton of RPG books that just sat very lonely on my shelf going, please play me. And I'm just like, I don't have time. And then I have, I live in the capital in London, and there's like, a friend, we'd go around to friends' places, but it'd always be in the pub, or it'd always be a really loud thing. And you just, I don't know, just something about like meeting up and telling a story or having a unique experience, whether it's a board game or something. And I just thought, maybe if I can combine all 3 things, give myself a project, because I'm one of those people that loves a project. And so that's where it sort of came about. So I started collecting these books and started, like, when we were at people's houses about to play a game, that I said, hey, we could play this one shot, and do you mind if I record you whilst we do it? And we sort of moved from there.
A good way of getting it rolling. I think with mine, I sort of it was a similar sort of thing, that I sort of saw this growing collection of books and thought, well, I sort of do at the time I was doing a completely different podcast with a friend of mine who moved away. I mean, it was all in-person recording. It's a pre-Discord, and that one was coming to an end. And I thought, I want to do more. I want to do more role playing. I also want to keep the podcast thing going. So combine the 2 sort of things. So yeah, I very much see where you're coming from in that. But,
and then the DM's Book Club came about. So went into the first lockdown back in March of 2020, and I was kind of going, well, our D&D game went online, which was really good, like, because everyone always has one D&D game or one RPG game they play regularly. And I kind of was like, well, the other problem I have is not only do I have several RPG books I don't read, but I also have many, many Wizard of the Coast books that I buy and then don't read. And I felt really guilty about it because it's like, oh, I must have a look at the next one. And there's all these modules I never ran, and there's all these like customized weapons and all that sort of thing. So I thought, why don't I drag the other person that is as passionate about D&D that I am, so my actual DM, Ryan, and we can challenge each other to start doing some reading in lockdown, because I was really struggling to do any sort of fictional reading. I couldn't concentrate on any books, but I thought if we set ourselves like a reading task every week or so, come up with a topic and then talk about it, because I'm sure you'll know, is that when you read something, you think, oh, this is really cool, but you can't tell anyone in case it ruins the story.
So 100%, yeah.
Yeah, so it was just very nice to be able to just dip in to that. So Ryan comes from a purely sort of D&D perspective, as do I, but then I also talk about different RPGs that we've run and then how you could change it. And then it was actually just a really cool sort of experiment, because I thought, why? Because it was the first time I'd ever recorded properly online, and we just recorded the start of season 2 today, actually, and it's just amazing that we've managed to put a podcast all together through online, which I know to many people doesn't seem, they say, oh, well, obviously, but actually I did most of my recording in person for What Am I Rolling, just because I just found it was easier and stuff. But actually, since being locked down and stuff, I was like, oh, actually, this can reach so many more people who actually wanting to play the games or be able to schedule it better. And I can, but because I've got quite a few friends in America, I was able to do that. And so it was just something. Going from doing the second podcast, which is completely online, has actually affected the first podcast. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell. As you can tell, I go around big loop of thought whenever I talk about it. So
yeah. I mean, that sort of evolving to an online thing is definitely something that's kind of happened with us as well. When we first started, our first group was myself DMing with my friends Eden, Mark, and Jason. And we very quickly, after sort of meeting a few other people online, including the people from Penance RPG and such, became sort of, well, why don't we can record online as well, sort of thing. And it sort of immediately kind of expands the potential group of players, as you say. It's it's such a useful tool, I think. I really, I definitely feel the what you were saying as well before about having all the Wizards of the Coast books just sort of sitting there going like, oh, this is so much stuff and it's really good, but I get it, and I give it a quick read through and go, oh, this is really cool. And it never I feel like I never have enough sort of time in the day to give it the proper in-depth read that it needs. So yeah, that's definitely, again, a big same.
Yeah, I think for me as well, it's like when you read stuff and you think, oh, this is really cool, and then you want to share it with someone, but if you share it with your players or someone who's involved in the campaign in some way, you're, oh no, this is going to spoil the story. And that's the constant worry we had.
Yeah.
But what's been interesting is that throughout, because obviously we've been continuing our campaign online, my DM Ryan, he's managed to do stuff, and then I'll be like, okay, what's your topic? He goes, well, we've just finished this and I know a lot about it, let's do this. And I'm like, okay, so it's no longer spoilers for me, because obviously we've just passed that fresh mark. So we did like right at the beginning, we did stuff on giants, and that's because we just finished a big story section on giants, which my character was very much backstory-esque, but I had deliberately not looked at any of it because I didn't want to, again, there's that whole thing about metagaming, etc. And I thought I'd rather find out about it through the story. Yeah. And then after it sort of finished, Ryan was like, right, let's look at it, and you can see the bits you missed. And I was like, oh, okay.
So I guess he's kind of having to sort of look at things a little bit in advance of the podcast recording, rather than, as you say, you're maybe picking the topic a little bit closer to, or have I got that kind of backwards?
Ideally, AJ, yes. What really happens is I go, do you want to record this weekend? And we both go, yes. Pick a topic that's less than 5 pages, and we can go from there. But yeah, it's a bit. Sometimes it's a bit of a mad scramble, but it's ultimately, as long as we both sort of read the stuff and are passionate about it. Because I think that's the thing is with all role playing games, is that if you're not passionate about it, then it's very hard to go into your head. Like, for example, today we talked a bit about the new Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, in the sense of the different, obviously you can customize your race and all that sort of thing, the new feats. And then we had a quick look at Sidekicks, because Sidekicks I find a really interesting, like sort of newish thing that's been put into books recently. Like, obviously, they've always been a thing. Like, you create a player character that can be an assistant or helps the party as a heal bot or whatever. But actually having rules for a psychic, which is a very simple process, not a full player character, but you could use it obviously if there's when it's just like if you've only got one player in your group or a very small player group, or if someone is like, I really don't have the headspace, or I really don't know how to play a full spellcaster, you could just develop a sidekick like thing, get them to try it, and then you could not transform it, you can upgrade it, make it into a player character. You can go from one step to another and increase the difficulty. Like, again, it depends on how people find it. And so it was just quite interesting from that point. So yeah, we always just pick a topic that interests us, or one we've read really recently and gone, that sounds cool. And it's not just limited to the official books as well. We've done stuff on on D&D Beyond. There's the Encounters of the Week. We've done a few of those. The Combat Wheelchair, which came out last year, we had a look at that.
Yeah.
Because that was really cool. To just check something out that was completely homebrew. I think that's like the first one we ever did was homebrew. And then recently as well, we've got some guest hosts that have come in, and we've talked about the Heroes Feast, the D&D cookbook that's also come out, and challenging ourselves to put more descriptions about food into our campaigns. So it's really a wide topic, but ultimately it is stuff that we enjoy or passionate about, or something we've just read. That's the normal go-to, and it's never planned in advance.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that's the thing, isn't it? There's such a wide variety of like rules and things that can be included in these games now. So even like you say, from official sources, that I guess you can sort of almost go like, okay, today let's talk about, like you say, new feats. Let's talk about new things and that, and you get a whole episode out of it. There's a lot of potential there. I like it. I feel like I don't personally do enough deep dives into rules. That's the thing. I kind of it's a bit of a sort of, I wouldn't call it like a bit of a kind of blank spot, because I do know I kind of I was gonna say I'm not completely flying by sort of
the seat of your pants.
Not all the time, but I mean, long-term listeners will know that a couple of the games we played, there's been a bit of kind of stumbling our way through this game sort of thing vibe going on, most of which gets edited out, but I mean, maybe it's just me being a bit self-conscious, but I can't help but think like certain points it's fairly obvious that I don't know what I'm talking about. But,
I trust me. I guess again, interesting enough, the reason I started doing one shots was because I didn't have the confidence or brain power to remember what happened in the previous session. So that's my secret. If anyone is like worried about like GMing, and the other thing as well is that if I saw this rule somewhere, but I've implemented it quite a bit. If I can't find the ruling within 30 seconds, just go with my gut and act as if I know. And my goodness, games go so much quicker when you do that. And obviously afterwards you can check it totally and stuff and be like, oh, you got it wrong. But that's okay, for next time. But it's just because I'm sure you're the same. That sometimes when you're bogged down with books, and you go, let me just check that, and then 5 minutes later you go, oh, it was this. Cool. And it's like, well, that's the moment's gone in combat and stuff. So I used to be really anxious early on, because I thought, I need to know all the rules, especially if it's a new system. Yeah. It turns out, compared to D&D, where most people have a grasp of what's going on, because it's just so familiar, and it's obviously on nearly every stream, every podcast is usually a D&D one. If no one else knows the system but you, has so much power, and it's so great, it's so good, and ultimately, again, as long as you've got a grasping of the rules, if somebody asks a question, you can go, that's a really good question, I'm going to say this. And then be like, cool, because they can't challenge you on it until afterwards when you go, I was wrong, but you agreed with me at the time, did you not?
It was cool though, wasn't it? Yeah, in retrospect, but yeah, no, I say that's kind of how we've sort of ended up playing things, really. The major examples I can think of was we play Call of Cthulhu, and I would say our grasp of the rules of that was not great. But we had a fun time. Again, last year I think we did play Call of Cthulhu for the first time, and I remember when I was a player first, trying it out, and I really enjoyed it. And I went to look at how to GM it, and my goodness, there's so many. Combat is there's a lot there, isn't there? Yeah,
there's so much there. So it was great because obviously I have to say, well, you could fight this creature or you could die, and they were like, so that made it easier. But yeah, like for me, with Call of Cthulhu especially, there's so much cool stuff to do with storytelling and that creeping sense of dread and stuff. And we played, maybe you played this one, but the Keeper's Handbook is that admits the ancient trees, which is all you have to go find someone in the deep dark forest. You've got to, it's a missing girl, and it's so creepy and scary. And we only had 2 players for it. They bloody loved it. There was a moment where I did the twist, and one of the players went "fuck" really loudly, which I had to edit out. Yeah. I honestly, you know, you had that as a DM. You're like, I've got them, I've done it, but you can't show it because obviously you're playing the villain.
Yeah.
So,
but the best thing is if you know there's a twist coming up and you can pull it off. If that like it's the worst feeling in the world is like dropping what you thought was going to be like an earth-shattering moment, and everybody just looks at you, you know. Yeah. So it's great when that kind of stuff comes together. I did read that scenario. I was thinking back. It was a couple of years ago we did Call of Cthulhu, actually. That's gone quickly as well, because I feel like it feels like it wasn't that long ago, and then I look at the dates and it's like, 2018. Okay, all right.
I'd say 28. Oh yeah, because now we're not in 2020 anymore. Yeah. Oh god. Okay. Yeah.
Well, but I mean, the story we played on the podcast was 100% a homebrew one, because I'd sort of come up with my own sort of setting and that. But I do remember reading through that scenario, and I want to go back to it at some point, because there's a lot of a lot of stuff that we didn't really get to kind of explore in terms of like game mechanics and just sort of story things and stuff, which I think could be a lot of fun. I'm terrible for running. Like I don't know. I pick up all these books and modules and things, and I just never end up running any of the pre-written modules because it comes to recording, and I'm like, but I've got my setting, and I'm not like tied to it or anything, but I just kind of will be sort of getting prepped, and I'm sort of putting a new group together, whatever, and like a story idea will hit me, and I'll go, let's just do this one, you know. That's so fascinating, because for me, because obviously I have to learn a new system every couple of episodes, I live off quick starts and quick start scenarios. I think only once or twice have I made on a handful, on counting on my hand, could I make a scenario just because the system is so generic, or I've had like you said, like a really good idea. So yeah, so like the admits the ancient trees scenario was perfect for that. There was also, because we used the quick start Call of Cthulhu 7th edition stuff as well. That one, which is about the creepy old man's house, which is always a good start to any horror game. But it was just all very straightforward, and then you could expand on that. Yeah. But I'm a big fan of using pre-written stuff, because only recently have I started branching out and doing my own homebrew stuff, just because I worry that if I say something wrong, I can't justify it, which I know sounds really odd, because I've started doing lots of improvising and stuff, so I'm getting better at it. But if I don't have a core story in my head that you go from point A to point B, and you have certain things along the way, I panic as a DM, because then, like you said, there's that moment we go, I've given you this, and they're gone, we don't understand it, or we've guessed it's this person as the villain or whatever. And I know players aren't like that at all. Like a very small minority of players are the ones who are going to say to the DM. But I don't know, something about a pre-written one, you go, well, I can go back to the book, it's here, and I trust that, because there's at least 3 other professional, in quotation mark, writers that have done this, so you can't go away from it. Whereas if it's me, I guess it's putting that personal thing on the table, going, look, I wrote this, what do you think? Don't hurt it, please. So I had that. But that's incredible that you did your own Call of Cthulhu scenario. Do you do that quite often then? You create your own scenarios for your games? I mean, normally, yeah, but I mean, I can't 100% say it's a good idea all the time, to be honest.
I was amazed. Yeah, that's amazing.
That it was. I mean, I've pretty much gone on record on the podcast of saying this, that a lot of it I was kind of making up as I went along. I had an idea of this is the general thing with my stuff, in whether we're playing D&D or Call of Cthulhu, or what did we do? We did Things from the Flood as well last year.
Oh, cool! Yes.
That I'll, rather than sort of write it out encounter by encounter, I tend to sort of have a general kind of idea of like, okay, here's what's going on. Here's a few kind of set piece things that the players might run into. Let's just see what happens, and I'll have like a sort of starting thing, here's the opening scene, and then we'll just see what they'll do, because long experiences taught me that most of, things are going to go off the rails pretty quickly if I plan it too tightly, my own stuff. As you say, if you've got the book there and the quick start, or a pre-written module, you can sort of refer back to it. But I think my page of notes for Call of Cthulhu, bearing in mind we did 13 episodes, was one side of A5 with some character names on it, which I don't recommend it.
Fair enough.
I mean, it turned out all right in the end, and I think a lot of people dug what we put out. But yeah, it's to pretend that I had a lot of stuff planned is I think we've gotten very lucky in things turning out well. It was a testament to my players more than anything else, because that could have very quickly turned into like a what are we even doing here sort of conversation.
Why are we leaving this warm, comfy place to go outside where there's cold? We should stay here.
No, that would have been the smart option.
Yes, exactly.
But I mean, as you say that, I mean, being able to sort of have the quick start stuff has got to be pretty helpful, right? Especially with doing so many one shots.
So I again, because of the lockdown and stuff, I think I've discovered that, like, I used to read when I commuted, and so I'd have a book in my bag or something like that. But since not being able to commute, I really struggle to do it. So anything that's I try and look for quick start rules that are under 20 pages, including a scenario, which I know seems like a very, very weird a caveat or a weird requirement, but it's because I know I'll struggle to read it. And if you send something bigger to players, be like, okay, here's this, it's all you need to know, they're not going to read it, especially if they're not going to be able to print it out at work or anything like that. So I try and keep it as simple as possible and just take what I need. I've been I'm very grateful that thanks to Adobe Reader, I can take some of the pages out and like make a player's copy and be like, this, just read this 2 pages, you're fine. Here's your character sheet, all that sort of thing.
You need to know kind of thing.
Yeah, just because again, before lockdown, I'm playing on. I never played online, and so having to. I mean, I'm sure you've had this as well. For me, recording online has been a blessing, because I can tell people to be quiet and stop, mute themselves, or I can mute them, all that sort of thing. If they need to repeat myself, I can, and I can edit it out much cleaner. So recording-wise is great, but you don't have the say. I feel that some people have this weird sort of thing where they can't have a physical copy in front of them. It's all on, you're staring at screens. People can use physical dice or dice rollers, and they're worried that, oh God, if you're using a dice roller online, you got to know the code for it. I trust you to roll your dice. You just need to ask me if you're unsure, ask me, and I will tell you which dice to roll and what they mean, But I guess it's, I don't know, compared to if you're there in person, when you can just like point physically on a sheet or be like, oh, those dice, pointing to them. So it's for me, it's good in the sense of accessibility for recording and being able to share stuff easily, but I feel that you do lose that sort of thing where people be like, oh God, I'm looking at sheets, oh, I'm looking at my screen, oh, I don't know if I enjoy this, and there's that worry as well on that front. But otherwise, I've actually really, really enjoyed playing online. Like I was one of those people who never played in a convention game at cons or anything like that. Again, a mixture of anxiety and imposter syndrome and all that sort of thing. But now I've run so many games online now. I'm like, I could easily go to a con and not be worried about it. And I don't know, it's just a weird thing. I just didn't have the experience, but now doing it so much online, I feel like, I can, when we ever go back to normal, I could do that. And I can't wait to try it actually when I go back. I feel like I've gotten real lucky with convention games, because I don't tend to go to too many conventions really. We've really only gone up to Dragon Meet 3 times. Obviously not this past one because there wasn't one. I've gotten real lucky being able to play all 3 times actually with Nikolai from Penance running the game, and he's just so good at rolling with whatever players throw at him, while also kind of having a fairly, a pretty strong idea of what he's trying to do with the game and that as well. I feel like I'm not quite there in terms of being able to roll on the fly in a confined sort of time limit as well of a convention game. So I'm really, anyone who's got the confidence to say, we're gonna run a game at a convention where anybody could sort of really roll up to it is
It's a big thing.
It's very anxiety-inducing, isn't it? And I think, but now I feel it's really good because on Zoom you can be like, I'm just going to take 5 minutes, 1 second, and then you can turn off your camera and mute yourself and you go, just like panic, and then you go, okay, ready to play now. You can't really do that in real life.
Yeah, just have a convenient pillow there to scream into in case. Yeah. I mean, in terms of recording online, we tend to just use Discord, really, and I think we've got a dice bot on the channel. But again, I'm happy if people want to use their dice to just roll it on the desk and tell me, because it's only themselves. It's only the sort of the group as a whole and the story that they're cheating if they're cheating. Because like, and at the end of the day, we're just. It sounds. I shouldn't. This isn't the sort of thing a DM should be saying, but we're just playing a game. So why are you cheating? Sort of thing.
And also you think like people invest so much money into dice sets, and then we're going to roll online, and they're just there going, but my dice, my pretty gems I bought, look, they clickety clack, and you're like, okay, fine.
I'm sympathetic as well, because just the joy that seems to bring people of like, oh look, I got this new set, it's made of opal or it's made of this, and like, cool. Now use this dice bot. You're still gonna roll shit, don't. So to get back to the one shots thing with the what am I rolling?
Yes.
Was it always kind of the idea of like it's going to be a one shot every time, or had you ever thought about maybe sort of stringing some together into a longer campaign, or was this sort of always the switching up each time? Is that the idea there?
So based off, so that, as I was saying before, when I was sort of thinking of doing a podcast, I went along to a podcast workshop ran at, oh God, I can't remember what they're called now, but somewhere in Whitechapel where they do all these open courses and stuff, and it was like an evening.
Yeah.
And the guy was saying, like, look at the other podcasts or in your field where you think you'd want to do it and see what you can do that's different. And obviously, if you type in RPG into Apple iTunes or Spotify, you get a lot of Dungeons and Dragons RPGs. And I'm thinking that, fine, obviously, and this is the thing, I know Dungeons and Dragons, as we talked about it for like the last 20 minutes, is super accessible. But there's only so many times you start listening to a podcast, and it's the same, usually an all-male cast. The first couple of episodes are a bit varying audio quality. They're pretty much, this is a character creation episode. You always have one that's 2 hours. There's always someone that goes, I've got a really cool idea, and it turns out it's the most boring idea because you've not had time to fall in love and get endeared to the character. And then they've got hundreds and hundreds of episodes which are like 3 or 4 hours long, and it's just one of those things where unless you're someone who's like watched Critical Role from the beginning and you've got endeared to like the players and stuff, or any D&D stream, for a matter of fact, I just use Critical Role because that's the example where they've gone from sort of midline sort of audio quality and stuff to high production values. I was just like, I didn't want to tie myself into doing that, because it was, like I said, there's so many D&D podcasts. There's some really excellent ones, some mediocre ones as well. So I was like, I don't really want to do that. And the other thing was, I wanted to play more RPGs because, and I'm sure you have this as well, a lot of the time people do want to play, and they only want to play. They never want to run games because they find it's too stressful, or I don't know if I'll get the rules right. But then when you run D&D, because everyone's so familiar with it, they will know what the monster is, or they're like, in the very rare cases, people will be like, its AC is this, and it's definitely this it's immune to, and we can't hit it with this. And I was just like, if I run a game which they haven't played, no one could tell me I've done it wrong. But also, running other systems, I think, makes you a better player. It makes you think a bit more about outside the box and stuff. So you're not going, I'm just going to hit this. I'm fed up of talking. I just want to do combat. Or if you try playing games that don't have any dice rolls in at all, and it's just conversation, and it's about thinking those things, I think it just opens up your mind, and I think you become a bit more courteous as well, because you realise that not all games are run the same way or are different. And I'd hope that what I do is that people will listen and go, oh wow, that was such a fun little one shot they ran, and it literally the rules are on an A4 piece of paper, and it was all vaguely made up. I could run that for my family, I can run it for my friends and stuff. So it was always, so that's a mixture of stuff. So it was more like, I wanted to do something different that was away from the other podcasts in the field, something that used a lot more systems, just because I felt it would make me a better player in general, and it'd be just trying that out. But I think mostly it is because I have no memory for remembering people's names or anything like that. I have thought about bringing people back to do like sequels of games. So we did one last year or 2 years ago called Mars Colony, which is a 2-person player game, and it's very political sci-fi where one person plays the savior of Mars and one person plays the governor of all the other roles. And you just do, if you imagine like The West Wing is a whole like 2-hour political film essentially, and they get given all these sort of problems that they have to solve, but of course there's so many pressures on them to get it right, and they don't think they're right for the job, etc. And so we played that, and it was really good. We were both really like, we were shaking at the end because we were like, it was so tense, and just managed to succeed to save the colony, but at the player's downfall. Because that's the toss-up, is that if people don't appreciate what the savior's trying to do, they will just vote them out regardless. And it was a very, very passionate sort of thing. And we were both, me and my friend David, were playing it. So I was the governor, that one, and he was playing Kelly Perkins, I think he was called, the character. And then there's a sequel called it's either called 39 Dark or Dark 39. I can't remember off the top of my head. I got it wrong thing. But then it's the same thing, but it's set after what Kelly Perkins did, or you can set it independently. So then we switched it around, and it was a very similar thing, but this time there's more of a pressure, more pressure groups and more sort of possible terrorist violence and stuff. I've got to be honest, some of the stuff we did in that game, it was really, really good, but watching some of the stuff that happened in the Capitol recently, I was like, I don't think I can release 39 Dark just yet.
not the best time.
Not the best time, but again, it was such a different game as well, which I would not have played. The fact that it can only be 2 players. It is a lot of talking, and there is dice rolling, but it is so tense, and then you having to gamble on certain things, and it's the way you talk to people and depends on your success, and everyone's got a hidden agenda and stuff. So it's just a very different way of creating a story. I honestly, I would highly recommend both of them. So that's Mars Colony and either Dark 39 or 39 Dark by Tim Kopapan or something like that.
Okay,
yeah,
I'll definitely check those out. That definitely
sounds, it's really good.
Yeah, I mean, I always lean more towards the sort of role playing rather than dice rolling sort of side of things, just in personal preference kind of thing.
I'd say as well, the mechanics for it do seem quite hard right at the beginning, but if you just, what I do with my games, which sounds really cheesy, but I would copy and paste them and then put them into a user-friendly document and then edit it so it makes sense in my writing. So I think in the end I took a very slim 60-page book and whittled it down to maybe 6 pages of like, here's the stages you need to do it. And then once you get to the like, here's how the gameplay works, it's just 9 scenes that repeat themselves with little variants on depending on what you do and stuff. So so it might seem overwhelming with the game mechanics for those 2, but once you've got it, it's very straightforward and very replayable, I'd say. We thought about it for a long time afterwards, both me and David were like, oh, we could play this with other people, like and it doesn't have to be like it could be with friends, or you could do it with a couple, or anything like that. I think David played it for his partner, Elle, getting her into role play as well. And so, I'm really excited when I remember those games. It was so good.
They go a different way every time, sort of thing.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. It was really, really good.
Yeah,
and really devastating in places as well.
I'll definitely check that out. Like I say, that sounds right up my street. That one.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, like you said, sort of editing down the kind of cutting down the 60-page book into like a helpful sort of I don't want to call it a cheat sheet, but I mean that's definitely
a cheat sheet, crib sheet. Yeah. Absolutely.
I had to do that. We played fairly early on our run. We played Star Trek Adventures before the core rulebook had actually been released.
Oh yes, yeah.
And I was definitely sort of, because I signed up for sort of pre-release stuff on that and things, and I played it with my friends who run a Star Trek podcast, so that was kind of a cool sort of thing. But that was definitely a case of like, I need to make myself a cheat sheet or find one online because I don't have the rulebook yet. It hasn't been printed.
Yeah, because that's the 2D20 system, and rolling low is good.
Which is a bit of a change of gears from D&D.
It was definitely a shift, you've got it's the 2 I can't remember the actual names, but you have a skill and then it's like a trait, and then you put them together to make the target number and all that sort of thing, and you're just like, Oh yeah, I had to do a crib sheet for that as well, and I still couldn't get it into my head when we did the scenario for that. It's really fun though, and I ran it with some people who love Star Trek, and they had a way, again, as we've sort of discussed, the players, you're ideal, they're like cool Star Trek, the Federation, etc. They were like, just want to find Space Gregs. That place is burning. Maybe there. Like,
that's partly what I love about that system as well. That sort of value system, because they can pretty much put anything in there. Of like, what's your value? I really want to find, I want to find love amongst the stars, or like I want to look for a cool mushroom, or like, I don't know, two places my brain went, but yeah.
There's like I don't think they're called quirks. I'm sure you'll correct me if I'm wrong. Again, it's been so long since I watched it, but it's like certain things it's like certain interests you have, and I just remember the main ships. Oh, specialties, I think it was. Yeah, and you had like. Yeah. You had like two like regular ones you would assume you'd use, in the everyday running of the ship, so like comms or whatever. And then one I remember being was just like a certain type of opera. Like, when is this person ever going to use this in the one shots, in the quick start, the signals one shot? You're like, come on.
We are actually. I guess this will probably serve as kind of an announcement, actually, because I haven't mentioned it on the podcast before. We are gearing up to do a longer campaign of Star Trek Adventures again. We did a one-shot last year. We were in our sort of mad first lockdown scramble to put together some stuff. But we had a lot of fun with that, and I think we're looking at hopefully doing that this year, I think.
Oh, nice. That's awesome. Like I really enjoyed when we did do it. It just took me a long time to get my head around the system. But once with any system, you've got it.
Yeah, once
as long as you enjoy it.
Yeah,
exactly.
I have fun. I mean, I had a lot of fun with it. But that, as I say, to go back to my original thing, that first time when I played with a friend who from the Spotlight podcast, that was, very much kind of learning it, kind of on the fly from it. The crib sheet was sort of invaluable there. But again, I don't know why I did it. I was like, I'll just homebrew a scenario.
Madness. Madness.
I think what I'm coming to learn is that I really shouldn't do things that way, because especially when it was like, I knew we had a time limit to record with them. They were only going to be in town for one afternoon. I think we had total, including meeting up time and getting things ready, and that we were going to have like 3.5 hours.
Wow.
And
damn.
Yeah, and I had this I put a fair amount of time into it as well. I was like, I've got this whole storyline and everything, and then of course, things never survive contact with the players if you do it that way. So I was sort of halfway through mentally kind of throwing out whole bits of the story and things, and going, why didn't I just do a pre-gen one? That's my own fault. It turned out well, though. It was a fun story, but yeah.
No, but I think back to the times when I have done the odd homebrew 1 and 2. There was a system we did really, really early on called Rhesus. I called it Riscus for the whole podcast, and then I had one person say, I think you'll find it's pronounced this, and I was like, oh, okay. So Rhesus it's very, very straightforward in the sense of like, you describe your character in like 2 lines. So I think it was like Bob the Barbarian, vicious, fighter, bloodthirsty, but also likes poetry. Okay. And so from that you get bloodthirsty, fighter, and poetry as those are your sort of core skills in a way. And then you roll d6s or something like that. That's the way you got traits. It was very much what you made of it. And I played it with my friend Claire before she moved away, and it was really, at the time I was really obsessed with Orphan Black. I don't know if you've seen that.
I watched the first couple episodes of it. Like, I want to say, it was definitely still on the air at the time. It was, I think it had gone a couple of series, and I watched the first couple of episodes, and as happens with me, I then got distracted by something else and thought I'll go back to that, and I think it's probably still sat on my Amazon watch list or something.
I mean, I only recently myself finished it because it took me. I do think it dips and wanes, the storyline does, but those first couple of episodes actually inspired me to do the thing where basically this character, we based it on herself, and like she was a scientist of some sort, but she was running where she was living at the time. She was living in Edinburgh, and I was like, describe you going for a run early morning around the meadows, whatever it was, and she was tying her shoelace or something, and she sees someone that's crying. And they meet eyes, and it's her, and it's that whole spoilers for the end of episode 1 and season 1. and she runs out into the road and gets hit by a car. And it's the idea, then the story went from there about like, but it was so funny because my friend Claire, who was playing it, she had no idea what was going on. She was like, am I dead? Is it ghosts? And I was like, no. And it's just like, not even sure, narrowing it down, and like I'm having other doppelgangers of her appearing up. She goes, there's several ghosts of me? And I'm like, no, away from the ghosts.
So she wasn't really familiar with the show either.
Oh no, which was great, because I think there's always that.
Yeah, that's how you want it, I guess.
Well, it depends, because I think I don't know about yourself, AJ, but when I describe something, I try so hard not to include cultural references until I kind of panic and go, it's like this, and people go, yeah, we got that, and I was like, damn it, like, because sometimes I go straight to it, and then I go, I've cheated them out of a nice description or something like that. But then I worry sometimes if the description's too long or rambly, I've lost them, and I go, it's like the Bridgewater Hall in Manchester, and they go, oh yeah, I can see that. And you're like, I probably shouldn't have made such a niche reference. But it was what was good about the Rhesus one. Yeah, Claire didn't. I hadn't seen it. She was thoroughly creeped out by it, and then at the end she was like, oh, it was clones, and I was like, there we go. But it was fun. But yeah, I didn't mind that too much, because then it felt like I could really lean into it and not be worried about spoiling it until there was that click moment where, when the player does say, fuck, we've been betrayed, that sort of thing. It's there's just something as a DM, I find that's really delicious, because you're like, yes, I did it, my little play, it's worked.
Yeah, I sort of said this earlier, when you sort of you pull off a twist is great, but also having the plan and having the player sort of be in the dark but being so close to getting something is another one of those things that kind of I'm there like, oh, they're nearly there, or like, they've just missed a thing that would have been very hard for them. That kind of thing is that gets me every time.
It's I think it's like when you watch a horror film or anything, and you see the person like looking in the cupboard and there's something behind them, and you're like, and then they shut it and they turn around and it's not there anymore, and you're like, oh, but it was there. And it's that little bit of knowledge. It's I love that and it's not necessarily like a control or power thing. It's just, I just love stories that do that, and you think, oh, they were so close to finding it, but that's changed the scenario, that's changed the whole thing, and that's such a shame. Oh well.
Well, we had to go back. I mentioned the Call of Cthulhu game we ran before. There was a moment in that it was in one of the. I mean, I didn't have any clue how long it was going to run for when we started. It ended up being 13 episodes, just because I was like, well, we're still going, I guess. But there's a moment early on where one of the characters. I'm going to try not to spoil things in case some people haven't listened to it yet, but where they went and they heard something and they just. I think I even asked them, like, are you going to go upstairs and check that out? And they went, no, I'll probably leave it. And and then later on it came back, and it was like I was able to use that as like, well, if you'd have gone and looked, that things would have gone very, very different for you. Let's just say that way. But they had the moment like where I was able to say something had happened, and it just kind of clicked for them, and they went, oh, I was there and stuff. And yeah.
Oh, that's super cute.
It's the best thing. I was making it up as I went along though, so it was, it was better the way it went than it did.
Definitely.
More than anything.
Definitely.
But so to take it right back then, so we all kind of come to tabletop RPGs in different ways. So how did you first sort of come into doing this as a hobby, sort of as a thing?
As a thing, yeah. So as you probably can tell from the last couple of minutes just talking to me, I don't do things by half. I am one of those people who, if I get obsessed with something, and using obsessed as a good word here, like if I get very passionate about something, I will do everything I can to learn about it and to follow that, because I feel that if you can't enjoy something, or you're worried that people are going to judge you for it, they're not worth your time or space of mind. And so throughout my life, like, I've always been one of those people who's like, oh, I wish I could do theatre studies at GCSE, but apparently I'm too clever for that. They say that to anyone just to get them away from doing anything creative. When I was at university, I was really into Doctor Who, so I became like one of the members of the Doctor Who Society. When I came to London, there was a Quidditch club, like ground Quidditch, and I went along to the first session of that, and then 5 years later, I finished my Quidditch career after playing in several tournaments, going to different places around the world, being on 2 or 3 different teams. Just because I was like, you know what, I need to meet people. I've moved to a new place, I'm going to do it. And it was through Quidditch, actually, as with all nerds are, we all congregate around these niche things. Someone asked if I wanted to try D&D, and I was absolutely delighted because it was one of those things where, again, it was not really a part of my school life or university, just because I guess because with the rise of like streaming and Twitch and YouTube and stuff, there just wasn't anything for me to watch or for me to see, or I didn't know about it. Like even then, like Critical Role, I think was pretty close to its end of season 1, I think, when that was coming out, and I vaguely knew about it, but I didn't look at it too much. But I just remember going to my friend's house, and obviously, typically I arrive late. I'm a very late person, although not so much nowadays because I'm in my house. But
not such
and they were like,
commute,
"Oh, is this?" Yeah, exactly, from the kitchen to the bedroom. But we got obviously the pre-gen sheets, and everyone else obviously picked their stuff. And I arrived later, so I was a bit flustered anyway. I said, okay, Fiona, we thought this would be funny for you. You can play the Halfling Paladin. And the reason it's funny, again, I'll give context for this, is that I'm actually quite a tall person. I'm about like just 6'1"-ish, maybe just under 6 foot, and quite tall for a girl. And also at the time, I had a really short dyed blonde haircut, so I looked a lot like Brienne of Tarth from Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
And I used to get mistaken for her at cons and stuff because of just the way I looked. So they're like, a knight that's also short, that's hilarious. That's the kind of humor you're going with. And so I sat there obviously looking at it going, oh god, there's so much here. Obviously now I'm like, okay, I can read it very easily enough. But everyone's going around the room and they go, my name is insert fantasy name here, and I do this, and this, and I'm just there going, oh shit, I can't remember anyone's name. They're all ridiculous fantasy. What am I going to do? And it gets to me, and I just called myself Susan. And my goal as Susan was to basically just forward the word of Susan, and everyone else was just lesser Susans until they proved themselves to be a Susan. And that was pretty much my motivation for 6 months. Because I just couldn't remember anyone's names, and it was really funny because there'd be bits where we would discuss things, and I'd be like, "No, Lesser Susan, you need to listen to Lesser Susan about this. Me as Susan, I can, it got me. It worked really well with me learning how to do pronouns for folk as well. Because it turns out if you use Susan as a pronoun, it really gets you ahead. But
it's just a solid bit as well. Like...
yeah, because I didn't mean to be the comedy element. It was just more me go, I'll do it for one, and if I hate it, I won't come back. And then obviously fell in love with it.
Yeah.
And it got to like maybe 6 months in. We were playing like the D&D start one, so the Lost Minds of Fandelver. We completely bypassed quite a lot of it. We were really bad at keeping on track. But on that, I was like, well, we're only meeting once a month because of schedules. Well, we could meet more if I run the game. Because I can try doing it. So again, that sort of thing where you dip your toes in, you buy a couple of books. I think then like Grant Howard, who is like obviously everyone knows a Grant Howard game, if not Honey Heist for sure, has obviously exploded in popularity. And I looked at that and I was like, that's really easy to run. All these things are really easy to run. And then friendship groups change and stuff. And I met my current D&D group with Ryan, and Ryan was like, oh, I really love D&D. Have you heard of 5th edition? I was like, yes, I'm playing it. And he was like, what? I've only played 3.5. And so talking about that, and then slowly but surely roping other people in to play our first very short campaign, and then going on to playing the current one and stuff like that. It's just, it's just it's really cool, I think, just finding out that people are also nerds about it. And going back to the Quidditch thing, I remember we were at practice and stuff, and I've been listening to stuff like The Adventures Zone with the McElroy brothers and father, and that whole premise of like the youngest son was DMing for 3 people, and most of that was completely homebrew as well, and completely ridiculousness as well. And I just remember these people, obviously they're like, oh, we're really interested in Dungeons & Dragons, and I said, well, if you're not too fussed about rules and stuff, listen to this. I got them all hooked on Adventures Zone. And then we all stopped after Amnesty, because Amnesty is, in case you not aware, so the first arc they have is like Balance, which is called basically D&D with bits of twists in it, and then they change it to one about monsters and monster hunters using the Monster of the Week system, which is excellent. And now they've kind of gone back to D&D, which is more of a Harry Potter based one. But I was like, it was nice to see such a quick flip into trying different systems and having other people listen to it and actually talking to people about it. So yeah, that's a really long-winded way of how I got into sort of playing RPGs. But it was quite a short transition from playing them to running them. Because like I said, I'm one of those people who just goes, I really like this. I want to do more of it. I'm not going to wait for anyone else to do more of it. Yeah. I want to do it.
What's the most efficient way for me to do more of this sort of
exactly. Because I'm sure you have this as well, when sometimes you do something and you go, I really enjoy this. And then you show the people who go, oh, we really enjoy it too. And you're like, great, we should do more of it together. And they go, yes. And I go, shall I organise a doodle poll? And they go, okay. I'm like, great. Because I have meetings and stuff when I offer like a suggestion for something, they go, that sounds great. And I go, should I do that then? And they go, yes. And I'm like, okay, I just wanted you to tell me yes, because otherwise I'll just do it without you telling me.
Yeah. So. The whole, as you say, kind of friend groups sort of switching around, you kind of find the people who are up for playing as well. I've definitely found that. I mean, when I first kind of started doing RPGs, it was very much like I'd kind of stumbled across the Star Wars Saga Edition as a sort of thing at the time. Sort of nobody I knew really, as far as I knew, sort of into D&D and stuff and everything. And even myself, I hadn't gotten D&D myself, but it was something you kind of hear about over years. You know, it's referenced on The Simpsons and Futurama and stuff as a sort of, oh, that's a thing, yeah. And then I kind of, I don't know, I can't remember if I downloaded it or whatever, but I got a hold of the Star Wars one. I was like, oh, I really want to play this. Oh, no one's going to run this for me. No one will ever run this for me. I guess I'll have to run the game myself. Although it kind of started out as like, here's some people who are nerdy stuff. Let's somehow convince them to, you know, get into it with me. And, you know, the group sort of shifts and things and that. And and eventually here we are.
It's that sort of like, if you don't do it, it will never happen. There's no point in wishing things were good. And maybe obviously I'm not aware of that. Like, it sounds like have you always DM'd, or have you played in longer campaigns as well, or have you always been the default DM in your groups?
I'm usually the default DMs, but definitely on the podcast here. Although we did run a short Shadowrun campaign, which cool. My friend Eden, who's involved in a lot of our other storylines, did run that one for us. Most of the time though, I end up being the DM. I have played in a couple of longer campaigns, actually on Penance RPG. I played on they did a sort of adaptation of Curse of Strahd that I played in, and cool. Then a sort of 100% oh no, was it based on something? I think it's based on the game Descent, I think, actually, the other one.
Oh, cool.
Which was a lot of fun. I find these days I have less and less, especially with the situation. Most
of the event. Don't remember the event.
Don't talk about the event. Don't think about the event.
Stay indoors.
Most of the time, if I'm playing it, is podcast related these days.
No, so the reason I ask is that, like, currently I run obviously the odd one shot or two for the podcast, which I try and aim for doing, like running recording 2 a month, and then I have my regular D&D campaign. But I just find that, like, some DMs just never get to play, and that's not necessarily their fault or the player's fault. But there's so it's so funny that you mentioned the Curse of Strahd. So I recently treated myself to the Strahd Revisited box, which is I was one of those people who's like, oh, do I need to rebuy it? Because do I need cards? Do I need the cool GM screen? Because no one's going to be here. Turns out I did, because not only it's very, very beautiful and really, really cool. It's a softback book. And just being able to pick up one of the D&D books without its binding coming loose is so magical. and it's lightweight and stuff. But anyway, that's beside the point, because I bought it and I was looking through it and I'm like, again, one of the other things I was very passionate about when I was a teenage girl, I read Dracula when I was younger, and I was like, I'm proper goth phase. I was like, yes, this is great. I read Dracula, and then I read Twilight and go, this is terrible. Why are people doing? So I immersed myself in, like, the Anne Rice and all that sort of thing. And then obviously looking at Strahd, I was like, this is a cool campaign. It's very, dark, horror and stuff, with some lighter moments. And I talked about it to my DM, the group, and everyone was like, that sounds really good. You should run it. And I was like, well, I'd love to run it. And then the DM, Ryan, was messaged me and said, please, could you run it? So I never get to play. And then I've sort of said it to say, all right, well, we'll do it. We'll make it completely online. We'll do it every 2 weeks because people's schedules and stuff. Here's a doodle poll. We're going to start doing it, but have a think about the character. Don't think about too much about backstory. But and already I've been sent little messages through going, would it be okay if I played this? And I was like, yeah, of course. Like, brilliant. And then it's just such a joy because the person that's been running your campaign for the last 3 years and only ever gets to run it, they've got their own world and they're comfortable with that and enjoy playing around with that. But there's something delicious about him being able to do more than just a one shot for him. Because we've done one shots together before and he's really enjoyed that. But just be like, do you want to have more than 3 sessions with this character? Absolutely. And then you can build on that. So I'm really looking forward to that. We're only going to do that, I think, from March onwards, basically, when I'm getting all this podcast stuff like scheduled, and then I'm like, right, we're going to do this on the side as well. Again, like I said, I've got all these projects on the go, but I'm really, really looking forward to running that. Actually, that'll be my first proper long campaign, and it'll be and I quite like being able to give DMs or GMs of other podcasts or anything like that, just for them to have a go. It's not necessarily anyone's fault that they don't get to play, but it's just so nice to be able to sit back and enjoy a session yourself. I've had it done recently for me twice. Actually, we had Richard from the D20 Future Show run The Expanse for us. Oh, and I really enjoyed that. Again, it's one of those games where I was like, this sounds really fun, and the lore was really interesting, but I'd never watched the TV show, I'd never read the game, and so it was just nice for someone else who was clearly very clued up on it and could run it for us. It felt so good, and I was like very relieved. And then we recently had our very first Warhammer fantasy role-playing from Chris from Darker Days Radio run it for us, and that was really cool. Again, very, very different style of GMing, a very different style of game, but we equally enjoyable. Like, again, a bit more crunchy than I would have liked, but it was one of those games where I was like, I'm so glad I have to run this and I can just enjoy it for what it is. And so it's just something great about that, and just being willing to try it is just amazing. So I highly recommend, if you're a player and you think your DM does not get a chance to play, run something for them, because they'll be very grateful for it.
Are you listening, my players? Are you listening?
Hint. I've not been. All right, you can pay me afterwards, AJ.
I'd say that's. I'm not saying I never get to play. But it definitely it's just the way it falls sometimes. You end up being like, okay, I guess I'm running this again, sort of thing.
I guess as long as you don't mind, because I think it's more like, as long as, for me, it's more making sure that players do offer to run games every so often, just to give the DM a break. Like, we've all had weeks where we've gone, you know what, there is no story this week, I am running on fumes, let's not play, let's cancel or take a night off. Because even though that's, for me, playing role-playing games, certainly being able to play my weekly game has been quite a little light currently. And it's like, okay, it's because we do it on Mondays. It's like, okay, it's the start of the week, so it's D&D night, hooray! And looking forward to it. And if the DM's not feeling up to it, or feel like they can't, run the game to the best that they feel they can do, that, well, I don't want that as a player. I want to be able to, selfishly be able to play, but also, I want to make sure everyone's enjoying their time at the table. So if I could take a session and then we can all play, bears trying to steal honey for a honey heist, so be it, because that's really straightforward, and it's silly, and it's just something different. Like, I remember we had a night off, so I ran my go-to for running games on nights off, which aren't recorded, is just Jason Statham's Big Vacation, the Grant Howitt one, where essentially you're all entourage for Jason Statham, and you got to make sure he has a good time on his holiday. And it's just great because you, as the GM, as Jason Statham, you could just be a big baby with an East London accent, and you can demand things. And people are trying their best to justify it. And honestly, I think we ended the session like cry, laughing, like almost not to the point of vomiting, but I just remember like so many people with red faces, and when you have aching faces from smiling so much. And it was just such a joy to do that and be like, okay, next week we go back to the grim fantasy world, but today we play,
just switch it up a
entourages.
Bit.
Yeah, exactly.
I had a lot of fun playing, because obviously we played together on Richard was running that as part of Dragon Meat, wasn't he? Jason Statham.
That's so true. I forgot. Yes, that's it. Yeah,
that was. I would say that was a breakneck speed that game, wasn't it? Jammed into an hour.
Poor Richard.
I had a lot of fun with that. That was good.
Yes, yeah.
I was kind of struggling to find my place at the start of it because I was playing the private security. And obviously it's like, well, at what point do I jump in here and say like, oh no, I want to be checking things out because Jason Statham's running right ahead and jumping into this lake, and I need to do something. That was fun. If the VOD is still available on Richard's on D20 Future Shows page, I don't know. I'm hoping it is because that was a real fun game, and I hope people can check it out.
I think so, or either that, or it might be podcast. Did in some way, I think. I don't know is the answer to that, but yeah, if it's still on there, it was such a good fun session as well. Yeah, like you said, at breakneck speed because we had less than an hour. we did mess about for a little bit of it.
Yeah. That was a fun time though. That was good to be able to be part of that. Just the day of streams as well. You did. Did you do a solo RPG that day as well? Didn't you?
I did. So it was my first ever live stream for any convention. I was supposed to, again, sorry, it's super boring, as you can tell, I go off at tangents very quickly. I was supposed to do my very first live show for the podcast in April last year, in 2020, at there's a place called Bonus Stage in Croydon. And everyone was going to come, it was really, really good fun. And then, of course, lockdown happened, and I was like, it's fine, it's like 4 weeks away. And then 4 weeks came and left, and I never got to do it. So I never did a show that was going to be streamed online, or one for a convention. And our mutual friend Mira, who runs the podcast zone, I just got a message the week before saying, I don't suppose you fancy closing out Dragon Meat with something? And I was like, yes, what time? She was like, it's 10 to midnight. I was like, all right, no one's going to be around. So I might as well just do a solo RPG. And the one that's always been on my list for a little while was 1,000-Year-Old Vampire, which has won like 3 Ennies, and it's quite a few people's game of the year for 2020.
Right.
And the idea is that it's just... You are a 1,000-year-old vampire, and you make the vampire, and then you roll a d10 and a d6, and then you take the results of the d6 away from the d10, and if it's a positive number, you move forward that number of page prompts. If it's negative, you move back, and if it's on 0, you stay on the same page but answer the second prompt and the third prompt, etc.
That sounds like such a fun game.
It's so much fun. It's only like the base game, there's like 88 page prompts, and then if you play it several times, you can do variation stuff. But what's the big key thing here is that your vampire has obviously been around for a long time. You can only hold certain number of memories in your head. You can hold up to like 5 memories, each of which have like 3 experiences, which are like 1 or 2 lines. And if you run out of space, you have to lose a memory because it's like, oh, it's not important anymore. Or you can transfer it to a diary that you have. So you can keep the ones there, and it could be like a leather-bound tome, or it could be like scraps of paper, etc. But what happens is that most prompts will ask you to change something, so either add a memory or check a skill that you have, or lose a resource. If you lose your diary, you lose those memories completely. Ooh. And it happened to me, not in the live show, it happened to me when I recorded the second part. I think I lost the diary like within the second prompt, and it took away so much. It was actually not devastating, but I was like, oh my goodness, I don't remember anything of important anymore. And it was just working that through, and actually doing a solo RPG for a live show, because I did quite a few solo RPGs on the podcast just now, because again, went into lockdown. I was like, right, what can I do in the days when I'm not seeing people? And quite a lot of solo RPGs are about themes about loneliness and being alone, so only do them if you're in the right headspace, I'd say. But there's something about 1,000-Year-Old Vampire where you're making this character, and the way you perform it and speak aloud, and that's the thing I've learned, is that when you're doing solo RPGs for a podcast, just being able to speak your thoughts aloud, not worry too much about editing yourself. Obviously, afterwards, maybe editing some of the pauses out or some of the big breaths and stuff. But yeah, 1,000-Year-Old Vampire by Tim Hutchings, I highly recommend. It's on Ichigo for like $15 or less, or if you want a really nice, fancy, thick volume, you can buy it from the website. Or if you look at, I got mine from a place called Third Space Gaming in Burnley. It's a local, friendly, not video game store, but friendly game store.
Yeah.
There you go. So again, my brain is going now. Clearly got rid of that memory, because the shipping fees are extortionate from America. But I thought I will treat myself to a physical book, and when it arrived, it was so pretty. and being able to flip back and forth as well. Yeah, so yeah, highly recommend that. 1,000 Year Old Vampire was so much fun, really fun.
Awesome. Okay, well, we're probably at the point where we should be talking about what's coming up next on your podcast. What have listeners got to look forward to on What Am I Rolling and DM's Book Club coming up in the next? If stuff is planned, I would say.
Stuff is planned. Sorry, I just opened the file on my computer of all the audio I need to edit. So we've got stuff like The Expanse we've just done, the Warhammer game that will come out. I recently finished a solo game called Below, which is a solo journaling day for 10 days where your character gets lost in a strange and unfamiliar place. Think like the Upside Down, essentially, and it's about how do you get back. And I'll put it this way: it is one of those RPGs where you have to go. It's very lonely and can be upsetting. Only listen. I've had to put content notes at the beginning, but that was really fun to record every day for 10 days. There's another game, a sort of RPG called Artifact, which is a slightly more upbeat one in the sense that you are playing a magical artifact, be it a weapon, be it a piece of jewelry or something like that, and you describe your story as your past between owners and what happens to them because of you.
Okay.
Which is really fun because, again, you can go all the way from like fantasy realms all the way to present day and beyond. Interesting change of perspective from, I guess, your sort of more mainstream RPG, I would say. I'm trying to think of the way. Yeah. It's I guess because when you think of items and stuff, you're like, oh, it's something that you are the person having the item equipped to, but this is purely from the item's perspective, and you can probably customize what you are, whether you're like a musical instrument, if you're, like I said, a piece of jewelry or painting or something like that. That was really good fun. The big one I did recently, though, there's a where do I start with this one? So I was emailed by two people called James Park and Ben Costa, who are graphic novelists in California. Yes, they always live in California, don't they? And they'd written a series of books called Rickety Stitch and the Gelatinous Goo, and it's they say it's Muppets meets Adventure Time. That sort of like that sort of cutesiness, but also has a real sense of like, we're in a dungeon, etc. So there's a really cool bit because I read they sent me the books to read, which again was really, really cool for them to do that. And it starts off with the Subterranean Pits and Lairs Limited company, taking over certain bits and pieces. So it has a little bit of corporate, a little bit of thing, and beautifully illustrated, and a really cool story. And they created music for it as well. Oh wow! But they've just started doing their own RPG system based on these books, and it's called The Land of Eam, which is available on Drive-Thru RPG. It's a D12 system. Very straightforward, and you think you only use D12s, and then there are so much, when I was reading it through, there's so many tables for the DM to get inspired by and put something, and it's all the tones of it sort of splits up into like really happy tones, sort of mid-level tones, and then like all grim dark tones, be careful, but all the characters have a little flavor to them. Like we ran a game, you start off in Wally's, which is like the main tavern in the used to be forest, and Wally's, there's like Happy Dunstan, the barfly, people playing cards and stuff. But Wally's is being taken over by the Subterranean Lairs and Pits Limited. You need to go find the deed, which is in the basement. But there are rats down there which are not happy about it. And you, a bit of a spoiler, but you face off against King Click, which is this massive rat, a teeny tiny paper hat which says Wally's on it. And it's just, again, it's very cute, it's very funny. We spent most of the time just having fun with the role playing of that game because it was so flavorful, and interesting. The advice for it was really good. And I will say, in the full rule book, again, there's like hundreds and hundreds of different tables for story hooks and stuff. There's a really cool one about encounters in dungeons, or like dungeon obstacles and traps. And one of them was just simply there's something guarding the way, and it says, "What is a good password?" And the idea is each of the players have to give what they think is a good password, and then they have to roll to see if the person who also agrees. Otherwise, they critique them on their password strength skills. And I just thought that was such a funny, again, just a little bit different way of doing a traditional dungeon. There's also like one I quite liked, which was the crossbow chandelier, where you look up, there's just a chandelier just made out of crossbows, and obviously if you go underneath it, you get shot. But if you dance underneath it, you won't get shot. But you don't tell the players that, so you have to see them.
It's a fun little loophole they can make their way through. Yeah,
exactly. So yeah, it's a Land of Eam, and I interviewed the designers for that as well. Yeah, like I said, James Parks and Ben Costa. So that will be coming out soon as well. And yeah. So I always have a lot on the go. Once I record stuff, it just sits on the hard drive waiting to be edited. So that, yeah, What Am I Rolling is fine. We got the second season of DM's Book Club coming up. We've got episodes on the Heroes Feast cookbook that's coming out. We talk about dryads, and we found some poetry about dryads, which is quite fun. Looked at the customization stuff in Tasha's and the new things with Sidekicks. And then we've got a few other guest hosts coming up for that, a couple of which have decided that they want to talk about their home game, which will be really fun, actually. We just need to find a book to tie it to.
Yes.
But it's quite cool because we've had to plan it so after they've done the finale, then they can talk to me about it. It's like, okay, that's fine. But yeah, that's all cooking away. Right? So I clearly got loads going on just now. So
yeah.
It's all good.
A lot of things to look forward to for listeners then. So
projects.
Yeah, a lot of projects. I'm definitely feeling that at the moment with my project list. Is just, it keeps growing, and I just that's how I work, is like make a bunch of project files and eventually get round to them.
Pretty much.
Okay, so where can our listeners find you on I guess social media and podcast places and things like that? So the What Am I Rolling on Twitter and Instagram is just at WAIR_podcast. There's a proper website and everything for it. It's just www.wairpodcast.com. And you can find the podcast pretty much anywhere you listen to podcasts. So, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, not SoundCloud anymore, because it turns out SoundCloud is rubbish. Don't sue me, SoundCloud. All that sort of thing. And DM's Book Club doesn't have a proper website yet, because I just can't afford to have that up yet. But it's you can find it on Podbean and all the other old bits and pieces, and that's also on Twitter at the DM's Book Club, all one word, with an S in it as well. So DM's Book Club, and yeah, come find us there. Come chat to us about D&D or any other RPGs. As you can tell, I can talk for ages on it. So. Yeah, awesome. So I guess we'll kind of bring things to a close there. Thanks so much for joining me for this interview. I hope you had fun.
I got to talk for an hour and a half, and you barely talked, so I feel great. So I can only feel how you feel. So.
It's all good. I should probably talk about plugging stuff. I should probably point people towards our own things.
Where could people find you, AJ? What do you do?
Thanks for asking.
No worries.
Well, you can find us, as always, on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, all of which we're at Pretend with Dice. One of these days, I will remember to post to Instagram again. You can also find our Ko-Fi page at ko-fi.com/pretendingwithdice, and the option is still there to become our first person to ever email us at pretendingwithdice@outlook.com. Nearly 4 years in, not a single email. It's going well. But as I said at the beginning, this has been the first of a new series of interview episodes that we're doing. So keep an eye out for a few more over the next few weeks and such. I don't know what order they're going out, so I can't tell you guys who we're talking to next. But
it's a mystery.
That'll keep you coming back to keep seeing who we've got on next time. I mean, or just look at the episode titles, whichever, but it's all good. So yeah, thanks once again for joining me, Fiona. It's been a lot of fun.
No worries. Thank you.
And I guess we'll see everybody later. Have a good one.